Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 22 of Conversing on Africa's Peace, a podcast focused on the African Union's Peace and Security Council and key related issues, produced monthly by Amani Africa Media and Research Services. Today, we're going to be reviewing the Peace and Security Council's activities for the month of September 2024. As always, Ion with you here from Amani Africa, and today I'm joined by my colleague Tefsehit Hailu. Tefsehit, please say hello to our listeners.
Hello, everyone.
So for the month of September, Cameroon will be assuming the role of chairing the Peace and Security Council. According to the month's program of work, it's envisaged that the Council will be convening 5 substantive sessions, or will be deliberating on 5 substantive agenda items. 4 of these will be taking place at the ambassadorial level, whereas one will be happening at the level of ministers in New York. And this will be on the margins of UN General Assembly 79th session. So as always, the planned sessions will address both country-specific as well as thematic issues. And in addition to this, there's also a plan for the PSC to undertake 2 field missions during the month. So it will definitely be a busy month for the Council. Aside from, these ambassadorial and ministerial level meetings, the Committee of Experts and the Military Staff Committee of the Peace and Security Council will also be conducting meetings during the month. But, as we always do, before we delve into the details of some of these sessions that are planned to take place in September, let's just do a quick recap of what were the key features from the activities of the Council during the previous month of August. So, Tefsehit, let me hand over to you to walk us through some of these.
Thank you, Zion. Yes, September looks like it's going to be a busy month. In August, Botswana presided over the Peace and Security Council. And in addition to the various sessions convened during the month, the Council was also occupied with an inaugural consultative meeting with relevant policy organs of SADC and SADC members. In terms of the key sessions that took place during the month, the update on the situation in Sudan is perhaps one that's likely captured the attention of our listeners. Following the session that took place on 19 August, the Council adopted a press statement. This time it was not a communique. If we take a look at what happened before the session, before this session happened, various diplomatic efforts towards peace in Sudan took place. One convening that happened prior to the session was the preparatory meeting for the Inter-Sudanese Political Dialogue, which was organized by the high-level panel on Sudan, together with the IGAD Special Envoy for Sudan. The other diplomatic effort was made by the UN Secretary General's Personal Envoy for Sudan. He convened the Sudanese warring parties for proximity talks in Geneva. In addition to the UN Secretary General's Personal Envoy ongoing efforts, the United States invited the Sudanese parties to participate in ceasefire talks. This followed the apparent suspension of the US-Saudi facilitated talks in Jeddah in December 2023. In addition to these efforts, the League of Arab States have also convened a consultative group meeting in Cairo. In addition to that, Djibouti then hosted the second consultative group meeting, which was followed by the mediators planning retreat on Sudan. So as you can see, there have been a lot of efforts that were happening around Sudan. And as a result, the Peace and Security Council during its session, in its press statement, commended and called on both warring parties to actively participate in the Geneva talks. But most importantly, the Council emphasized deep concern over the proliferation of mediation and peace initiatives, and highlighted the need for improved coordination and complementarity of these efforts through collaboration among the African Union and IGAD and also the neighboring countries. The Council also reaffirmed the critical role of the AU, particularly through the high-level panel and the IGAD Special Envoy in these peace efforts. Well, another important element that was emphasized by the Council was that the Council called for an immediate investigation to identify all actors fueling the conflict and the peace spoilers. It also directed the Peace and Security Council Subcommittee on Sanctions to work with the EU Commission and the Committee of Intelligence and Security Services of Africa to identify external supporters of the warring factions, military, financial, and political, as well as to propose measures to contain these actors within 3 months time frame starting from June 2024. So the last couple of calls the council made, it's not the first time. The council just reiterated previous decisions. So this is what happened with regards to Sudan. If there is anything that you'd like to add, Zihan.
Thank you so much, Tafsir, for that. I think definitely key calls from the Peace and Security Council. So like you said, maybe just to also highlight another perhaps interesting session which took place in August. There was the session on Constitutionalism, Democracy and Governance, which was conducted virtually and also in an open format. So it garnered the, participation of various actors. And, as can be gleaned from the press statement which was adopted following the conclusion of this session, some of the key highlights which were emphasized were the need for drawing nexus between democracy, human rights and development, also the importance of domestically rooted constitutionalism, democracy and good governance, especially for, building sustainable peace and also prosperous societies. It was also interesting to see an emphasis on the need for ensuring that democracy is, responsive to the legitimate needs and aspirations of citizens, and also that it becomes productive in creating inclusive societies. So these were really some of the major outcomes from the engagement of the PSC on that specific session. But aside from these, it's also important to note that the PSC, it gave due recognition of the stalled kind of and also complex political transitions which are being experienced in a number of member states currently. And of course, as these are connected to the consecutive kind of unconstitutional change of governments over the past few years that we have all observed. And I think what was important is also that in connection to this, and also to avert the occurrence of, unconstitutional change of governments in the future, the PSC reiterated its request to the African Union Commission to undertake an in-depth analysis of the 2000 Lomé Declaration on Unconstitutional Change of Government and also the AGA more generally. And this is with a view to ensure that, these frameworks and instruments do respond appropriately to the contemporary challenge that the continent is facing. So would definitely be interesting and also critical to follow up on the conduct of this analysis by the AU Commission, and something we will all be tracking as we go forward. So yes, having viewed some of the key sessions which took place during the month of August, we can now look on ahead. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Cameroon is taking the responsibility for chairing the PSC in September. And I've also already mentioned that, the provisional program of work envisages 5 substantive PAC sessions and also a couple field missions. Alongside, the field missions, the council's members will also participate in a series of bilateral and also multilateral engagements throughout the month. A key event among these is the 79th UN General Assembly session or meeting. So this is also now accompanied with the Summit of the Future, which will, take center stage during UNGA 79. So Tafsir, maybe if you could just walk us through these and some of the planned sessions and also activities that will be taking place during September, please.
Thank you, Zihan. Yes, for September, the first session of the month will focus on the protection of journalists in conflict situations in Africa. This will be the first time the Peace and Security Council will dedicate a session to discuss the journalists in conflict situations as a standalone item. In previous years or in previous PAC sessions, the issue was brought up on sessions that discussed access to information. However, it was never discussed as a standalone agenda item. So the expectation is that this session will present an opportunity for the Council to discuss various issues, including safety and security of journalists, psychological impact on journalists, the impact of journalism on conflict, also legal protection and impunity, as well as training and preparedness of journalists when working in conflict situations. And in addition to that, the other session that's happening in September is the Open Ambassadorial Level session on disaster management in Africa and the nexus between climate change, peace, and security. This session is timely as African states are increasingly engaged in discussions about the escalating impact of climate change and the surge in natural disasters over the past decade. And in the previous years, we have seen that Africa has witnessed a significant rise in such events from the devastating storm Daniel in Libya, which happened last year in September, and it claimed over 4,000 lives. And the frequent cyclone in southern Africa, particularly in Mozambique, and the growing number of floods in East Africa. We have observed these disaster situations in the past year. So these occurrences underscore the urgent need to address the root causes of natural disasters and find sustainable solutions. So we expect that the discussions will be along these lines. In addition to these two sessions, as Ihon said, there is a key event that's happening in this month, which is the 79th United Nations General Assembly meeting, where the Summit of the Future will be the highlight. So on September 25, alongside the Summit of the Future, the Peace and Security Council will hold a ministerial level session focused on new security threats in Africa and the future of the Peace and Security Council, making its 20th anniversary. This session is expected to build upon the issues raised during the Peace and Security Council Summit that happened in Dar es Salaam on May 25 and further develop the Dar es Salaam Declaration issued during the anniversary. These are some of the sessions that I wanted to highlight for our conversations. If you would like to add more, I'll give it back to you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tafsir. I think you've covered the main ones. But yeah, just to add a couple more items from the Council's activities for the month. As I've already said, there will be, a couple of field missions. The first one of these will take members of the PSC to the Central African Republic, and this would be to commemorate the African Amnesty Month. This is something which, has taken place every September since 2017, and this is within the framework of AU's flagship project on silencing the guns. So as CAR, also forged towards the conduct of local elections in October of this year, which will be for the first time in over 3 decades. I think the commemoration of Amnesty Month in CAR this year affords also the chance for the PSC to underscore the importance of inclusive and also participatory electoral process for building sustainable peace and order, which obviously is a very essential and core part of AU's flagship project on silencing the guns. The other field mission, which is planned for the month, will take the Council to Gabon. The core purpose of this visit is to engage with the transitional government and to discuss also the status of efforts for the restoration of constitutional order in the country. As we all recall, Tafsir, Gabon experienced a coup on the 30th of August last year, and it has been under political transition since then. So this is essentially the framework within which the Council will be conducting this field mission. And, notably, some of the key tasks and steps which are necessitated for the restoration of constitutional order have already been implemented. They've already been undertaken by the transitional government, chiefly, including the launching of the national dialogue process in April 2024, also the establishment of a transitional timeline, which were, especially the key tasks that the PSC has been emphasizing in its previous communiques on the situation in Gabon. However, it's important, of course, again, to stress that it remains really critical to expedite, the full return of constitutional order in the country.
It's a very pertinent time for the Council to take a field mission to Gabon, considering the situation and the progress that have been made in the country. On a related note, there will also be a session dedicated to a discussion on civil-military relations and conflict management in Africa. Having regard to the resurgence in military coups, the continent has witnessed since 2020, This particular topic is in fact of increasing importance and warrants in-depth reflections. Having regard to that, the Peace and Security Council has also, over the past 2 years, consistently scheduled sessions to address civil-military relations as a factor for peace and security in Africa, but it's yet to successfully deliberate on the issue at ambassadorial level. So it would be interesting to follow up on the convening of this session and the key outcomes emerging from the session.
That's definitely true. Thank you so much, Tafsir, for that. And just to add a final reflection, the PSC will also conduct, or rather it will, conclude its activities for the month with a meeting dedicated to the situation in South Sudan. So, as we all know, the country is nearing the timeline for the conduct of its elections, which, is slotted for December of this year. So I believe that, this session offers the opportunity also for the Council to engage South Sudanese stakeholders, to call on them, to ensure that they put in place all efforts for ensuring an all-inclusive electoral process, which also ensures the consensus of all relevant stakeholders and actors. So having said that, I believe this brings us to the end of another episode. We wish Cameroon a very fruitful month as it takes the chairship for September 2024. And we also wish everyone taking part in the work of the PSC productive discussions on the important topics that are outlined briefly here today. We are happy also to encourage our listeners to dig deeper into the PSC's agenda, as well as the analytical work that we produce. Amani Africa is also appreciative of the partnership and support of our partners in the production of our insights on the provisional program of work of the PSC each month, and we believe that this podcast is a useful accompaniment to our work. Before we go, as usual, we'd like to wish the following African states happy National Days of celebration in September. We have the Kingdom of Eswatini on 6th September, the Republic of Mali on 22nd September, the Republic of Guinea-Bissau on 24 September, and the Republic of Botswana on 30th September. Let me also thank our listeners for joining us for this month's edition of Conversing on Africa's Peace podcast. We wish all of our listeners a very productive month ahead. We'll be back next month to consider the PSC's agenda for October 2024. Until then, goodbye. We wish you all peace and prosperity.